Hey guys, this is Ed Watkins, and this tutorial is going to be about character controllers and collision behaviors. Pretty much today what we're going to do is we're going to add a character controller to this capsule, see how I can move it left and right here, and then we do a little bit of jumping. And we're going to code some collision behaviors so that we'll be able to do things like pushing objects. Yeah, push it left and right here. And then, lastly, we're going to turn it into a bounce pad to where once it's on this platform, it'll just bounce continually. Yeah, a lot of games have bounce pads like Sonic and stuff like that. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to add that last bit. But yeah, it's all pretty simple, just a couple lines of code. But I guess we could just go ahead and get started. The first thing you're going to need to do, it's going to need to go to File and then Create New Project. And so just pretty much just pick wherever you want to set this project up. I think I'm just going to go with my desktop right here. You can name it pretty much whatever you want, but for this tutorial it's going to be called Collision Test. And this down here, this is just the character controller Unity package, or this is just where you would import your packages. I usually import my packages later, so that I don't have unnecessary packages that may like cause problems down the road, or it might just slow down Unity. So I like to do that later, and I'll show you guys how to import your packages as needed. But for right now, we're just gonna click create. See how it exits out my last project that I had going, which was pretty much going to be the end result. But right now it's going to restart and give you a blank scene. Alright, so now that we have our empty scene, we're going to start creating the objects we need to replicate the scene from before. Pretty much all we use there is we're gonna need 3 cubes, 1 capsule, and 1 directional light. So to do that, we go to Game Object, 3D Object, and we hit Cube. That'll produce us our first cube. Then we just pretty much do it three times until we get all 3 cubes. And then lastly, we scroll down a little bit to get our capsule. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to position and scale the objects so that they're where we want them to be. So we'll just take this first one, and the position is going to be at 0, 0, and then -5. Scroll down a little bit for the scaling, and that'll be at 20.5 and then 2. See, this cube right here is going to act as our floor, and we'll be positioning the other objects pretty much right on top of it. And so we go back to the second cube, and that one's going to be 3, 3, then -5. And for the positioning, or the scaling, my bad, it's going to be the scaling, that's going to be at 3.5 and then 1. Pretty similar for the last cube, but we want it on the left side this time. It's going to be -5 for the X, 1.5 for the Y, and then -5 for the Z. Now down for the scaling, it'll be 3.5 and 1. So that does it for all our cubes. We'll reach back a little bit to click on our capsule, and we're not really going to change the scaling, but the position is going to be 0 at the X, then 2 for the Y, and -5 for the Z. And now we're gonna do the directional light. Pretty much what you do is just go back to Game Object and then scroll down to Light, and we're going to click directional light. And see, that already looks better. We're not really going to touch the directional light because it's doing what it needs to do already. Yeah, it just seemed a little extreme to move it around because we don't really need it to be moved. But what we do need to position slightly better is our camera. So you're just going to click on this camera icon right here, and we're going to change that position to 0, 2.4, and then just going to keep it that as -10. And now, if we run our scene by pressing the play button up here, it'll give us this kind of view. Notice here that the camera is a bit zoomed in, so we're gonna exit out or we're gonna unload our scene, and we're gonna have, with the camera still selected, we're gonna go to projection and turn that to orthographic. So when we run it again, it's not going to be as zoomed in as it was before. Let me just unload. Alright, now that our scene is set up, we're going to attach our character controller to our capsule. And that'll allow us to start coding and scripting different types of behaviors for the character controller. But first, before we can attach our character controller to our capsule, we have to import the character controller package. At the beginning, when you made the new project, there is the checkbox where you could have done it there, but I'm gonna show you how to do it from inside your actual scene. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna go to Assets, then Import Package, and then Character Controller. I'm just gonna click that and let it decompress the package. And once it decompresses it, you just click Import, and we wait till it's done. And once it's done, it's gonna have a little assets folder right here that'll have all the packages inside. Yeah, see, once you click on assets, it shows up. Now we have everything we need. So first, we're going to click on the capsule, and then we're going to go to Component, Physics, and then Character Controller. Now, as you see over here in the inspector view, we have our character controller and all of its properties. And now that we have a character controller, we need a script to write code to the character controller. You can do that by going to Component and clicking on the script, or you can go down to Add Component and then New Script at the bottom, which is probably the best way to do it, so you can assure that you have a blank script when you're ready to start editing. And so we'll just name this script Collision Code. Make sure it's in C#, and just click Create and Add. And now you can see that the collision code script is right here, and it's attached to our capsule collider. And once we're done with that, we can we'll double click the C# file in your project window, and that will open up the MonoDevelop code editing software that Unity uses, and it'll just display the basic code here that Unity comes with, and from here we can start editing. Now that we have our script open, we're going to start building the basic code for a character controller. Now we're going to start doing a little bit of back and forth between Unity and MonoDevelop, but don't worry, it's going to be really easy to follow. So what we're going to do to start off is we're going to initialize our character controller. I give it a couple inner key presses. I like to have a little bit of space when I write code, but for right here in this block, where all our code is going to go inside of the public class collision code. That just lets it know this is everything that a collision that our class consists of. And that's why all the code is going here. And so the first line we're going to write right now is the character controller. This is just a character controller variable, so that we know, or so that we can reference it as our main controller. And next we're going to type controller equals get compound, or get components, sorry. Character controller. Yeah, this whole process pretty much initializes our character controller. Alright, now that the character controller is initialized, we're going to add some basic code that'll handle the movement, or at least the left and right movement for the character controller. We're gonna need a couple more variables, so right under the controller variable, we're going to add a speed variable and set that to about 5. Which can be changed later if you want to make it faster or slower. Just come back to this line and then make it a larger or a smaller number. Then we're going to make a vector3 variable. This just stores the movement information. And now we're going to go down to our update function, which Unity calls this function every frame. And so every time a frame happens, it runs this function and it'll get the information that we're about to put in for the movement. Alright, this first line just gets the information from the user, where Unity has set up keys. You can use the left and right or A and D to go left and right. So this just lets the movement information know that when those keys are pressed, we do the horizontal times the speed to tell it which way to that it's actually going to be going. And the second line of code, it just makes sure that the frame rate is steady. Certain computers might run at different frame rates, but this line of code makes sure that it runs steady on any different computer. And now that we have this basic script run, we first hit Control S so that we save we save the current script, and we can go back to Unity, and we can run our scene. And once the scene is ran, we have movement. And notice how it stops at each of the different platforms, because Unity natively handles basic collisions to the point where it'll stop at another object if it detects that it's colliding with another object. And also notice how the capsule is pretty much just floating in the air right now, but in just a second we're going to add some gravity code so that it'll fall to the ground once the scene is ran. So let's get back out of this and head back over to MonoDevelop. To add the gravity, what we're going to do is we're going to space down a couple lines. I kind of like to have my code a bit spaced out, just the feels a bit more organized. But we're going to, this is one line of code, or I guess two. It's 2 lines of code for the gravity. It's going to be a conditional statement first. And I guess just backspace it back if it does the random indent thing. But first, this conditional statements, the characters controllers, they have different parameters, and one of them is grounded. And if that's not true, then that means it's not touching anything on the bottom. So which for us that means that it's in the air. And what happens if it's in the air? Then the velocity from the y-axis gets added to itself, plus the gravity, and the time.delta time is again for the frame rate. And so now let's go back to Unity, and well, first we save, and then go back to Unity, and we run our scene again. And see, now it has gravity. It goes back and forth, and now that I'm below, I can actually go past that platform. And I guess just out of curiosity, when you go out past the platform, the gravity kicks back in because we're no longer grounded, and it'll just fall continuously since there's no other object. But now that the gravity is done, we're gonna do jumping. Okay, so the jumping code is pretty similar. We're gonna go back up here, and we're gonna make another public float for the jump speed. I'm just gonna set that at 8, and we're gonna go back down to our update function, and for another conditional, alright, and this code pretty much says that if we enter one of the jump buttons, which in Unity is the space bar. If we press the space bar, and if controller dot is grounded is true, that means we're on the ground. So if both of those things are if both of those conditions are met, then we set the movement.y to the jump speed, which will pretty much just launch it in the air. And so we save again, and we go back to Unity, which off to the side here in our inspector view, it'll tell us pretty much the entirety of the code for the script that we have selected at the time. So we have our collision code selected, and it'll tell us what's all in it. So for just in case there's like errors and stuff, you can catch it in this view instead of going all the way back to mono develop. But for now, let's run our scene one more time. And now you press the spacebar and it jumps. And notice how you're still landing on the platforms because Unity is handling that collision automatically. Alright, and then we'll unload our scene, then go back to mono develop. And now we're going to get into a bit of extra things you can do with collisions, such as pushing things and the little bounce pad extra that I showed at the beginning. And again, the code is pretty simple. It's not that much code, so let's just get right into it. So the first thing we need to do in preparation for the pushing code is we need to go back to Unity, and we need to give our cube here a rigid body component. And so we do that by going to add component, then physics, then rigid body. And you can see that it came back over here in our inspector view, which we also could have went through the component and physics and it would have done the same thing. And so now that we have the rigid body component to our cube, we need this so that the capsule has something to interact with, because if it doesn't have some type of collider or rigid body or character controller on it, it's not Unity's only going to do the bare minimum for a collision that happens. It's not going to be pushed or anything, even if we script it that way. So what we have to do now is adjust the rigid body so that it does what we want it to do during our scene. And one of the things we're going to do is we're going to uncheck this use gravity button, because when we start our scene we don't want it to fall straight to the floor. And the next thing we're going to do is we're going to set the drag to about 20. The drag gives us how much force we need in order to push the object. And so for this one, I just set it to 20 because the number we're going to eventually set in our code, 20 seemed to be the optimal number so that it wouldn't just get pushed forever, and it wasn't too high so that it would just not be pushed. And so now that that's set up, we can go back to mono develop and begin typing in our code for the pushing. For the pushing code, we start back up at the top, and we're going to make yet another public float for the push speed, or the push power. Set that to 2. And next is really important. You go down and make sure it's inside of this bracket, down here, but not inside any of our other functions, because we're going to write our own custom function. So this is going to be void on controller collider hit. Yeah, that's void on controller collider hit. Every different word is capitalized. Capitalization is very important. And this function, Unity also calls this function every time there's a collision. If there's nothing in it, it usually doesn't do anything. But for our custom code, we're gonna put our push code in here so that Unity knows to execute it once a collision happens. I went ahead here and typed in all of the code because it was going to be a bit of typing, so I just went ahead. But we can just go through the code line by line really quick. So for the void on controller collider hit, it takes in a controller collider hit variable, which is essentially the collision that happens between our character controller on our capsule and the rigid body on the cube. And so it takes in that hit, which also has a rigid body attached to it, and we set our own rigid body for this function to the rigid body from the cube. And this next conditional statement down here, it says if the body doesn't exist or if the body is kinematic, which kinematic means it's going to ignore the physics from Unity. And so if it's either null or if it's kinematic, then we exit out of the function. And then the next line down here, this is if the direction from the hit comes from below the it comes from below the capsule, then we don't want to push it because we don't want to push objects that are going to be below the capsule. Like say if the floor had a rigid body, we wouldn't want the floor to get pushed like from the left to the left or the right. We just want it to stay still. And these last two lines, we're creating a vector 3 for the push direction, which handles the directional information from the from the capsule. So when it gets pushed from the left, the body knows, the rigid body on the cube knows to go right, or if it gets hit from the left, it knows to go left. And this last statement is just telling the velocity which way to go and how far to go according to the push power. Now, once you have all that typed in, you save your scene, and we go back to Unity, and then we run it once again. Now, with the gravity intact and the jumping intact, we start to be able to push our cube, and we can push it back all the way over to right about here, and we can simulate the process of going upstairs. And now we just unload our scene and head back to MonoDevelop for the last part, which is going to be the bounce pads. So for the bounce pad code, we're going to edit this conditional statement right here so that it doesn't just return, and that it checks a couple more things before deciding if it's going to return or not. So I already have it prepared. And the original condition is not changed, but however, it has another condition once the initial conditions are met. So it's like if the hit direction is below the capsule, it now checks if the body is null or not. Which, if it's not null, then it pretty much just activates the same code that we had back up here with the jump command. So it's essentially going to be a continuous jump up and down until the user moves off of the platform. And if the body is null, then it'll return and exit out of the function. So we save it again and go back to Unity, run the scene, and now we have our bounce pad. Notice that you can't see my keyboard right now, but I'm not touching anything. I'm not hands completely off. You can test it once you're satisfied. You can even go off to the side, and the pushing mechanism is still in play. So you can push and then go back up and bounce some more. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That's gonna be it for the tutorial. Thanks for watching. I hope you guys really learned something from this tutorial, and be happy to look at you guys' tutorials, and hopefully we can just bounce ideas off each other. But thanks for watching.